she was coming up and touching my veil. I was talking to my maid of honour and she said to me, "This woman's a little bit touchy-feely."
Audra Keeble remembers a mysterious guest at her wedding back in the 90s.
They said that there was a photographer who was in training and wanted to come along and watch what goes on. But we didn't think anything else of it and had no clue who she really was.
She wouldn't discover the significance of that meeting until years later. Audra was a forced adoptee, taken away at birth in Western Australia.
I remember always being told that my birth mother didn't want me. So I always felt like I was an unwanted child. As a baby, I used to hold my breath until I passed out. A psychologist finally came to the conclusion that it was because I was ripped away from birth.
Between the 1940s and 1980s in Australia, many unwed mothers like Audra's mother Marilyn were coerced to give up their children. They were restrained during labour, lied to and used for training medical students. It's estimated up to 250,000 babies have been taken, and many of their birth documents were sealed away. Could you take us to your birth certificate?
Sure. Which one? I actually have two birth certificates. This is my birth certificate. And again, there's nothing on this document, nothing to state that this is part of an adoption.
Audra says she loved her adoptive family.
But Mum was very insecure. She always felt that I was going to be taken away from her.
That fear discouraged Audra from trying to find her biological parents.
I was living a lie. I wasn't being me.
What she didn't know was that whole time her biological mother had been searching for her. Her mother had poured through electoral rolls, hired a private investigator, and found out Audra was getting married. This is Marilyn Ruliansich.
Oh, I can't imagine, honestly can't imagine how she got through that day.
Marilyn had snuck in as the photographer's assistant and kept her identity a secret so she wouldn't ruin her daughter's big day. It wasn't until a couple of years later that Marilyn got in touch through Audra's then husband. She called him after the couple shared a birth notice in the local newspaper.
And I said, "Oh, what did she want?" thinking it was one of our friends. And he said, "No, not that Marilyn." And with that, my heart sunk and I just knew exactly who it was that he was talking about. It was my natural mum. I wrote a letter to her asking her how she came to the conclusion that I was her daughter. The date of the letter was actually her birthday. So 365 days of the year I could have chosen to write to her. I wrote the letter on her birthday.
And Marilyn wrote a letter back.
"My dear, dear Audra, thank you. Thank you a million times for the letter that I've been hoping and praying for what seems an eternity. You made me extremely happy,
and to top it all off, you even wrote it on my birthday. What has always seemed a hopeless situation to me now has a glimmer of hopefulness in it. I was going to cry. So was I.
They connected over small coincidences from their separate lives. Their love for champagne and gardening. Both had teenage boyfriends named Ian. and even wore their hair in French buns at Audra's wedding.
I felt so numb the whole time.
How did you get
I
through the day?
had to just keep my mouth shut all day long and just pretend I was a mute. I didn't know you.
Yeah.
And that I didn't know if I ever would.
Victoria is the only state which has a redress scheme for mothers who had a child taken from them at birth. It includes a $30,000 payment, access to counselling, and support with seeking an apology from organisations involved, like maternity homes and adoption agencies.
When my youngest son was born, one night as a tiny baby, I was carrying him upstairs to bed, and I suddenly started crying because I suddenly realised what I had missed out on with Tim, with my eldest. And it's something that affects you for your whole life.
Joe Fraser's son was taken away in 1971. They've since reunited.
This is his birth certificate, original birth certificate.
Joe gave birth in Victoria, which makes her eligible for compensation.
Oh my goodness, look how young you look. Look how young he looks.
Yes, he was 19.
Marie Megget gave birth outside of Victoria. She now lives in Melbourne but can't access any redress. Marie and Joe are part of Arms Victoria, a support organisation for mothers whose children were taken away. They've also formed a national advocacy group, the Mothers Adoption Loss Alliance.
One of our first objectives was to persuade the federal government to have a national redress scheme. We've now been told categorically that that is not going to happen.
Federal Social Services Minister Amanda Rishworth declined an interview. In a statement, she said the Commonwealth provided annual funding for forced adoption support services totalling $2.8 million this financial year in recognition of the increased need for these important services for survivors. Joe and Marie are petitioning for other state and territory governments to follow Victoria's redress scheme.
It's not just for mothers, so we're asking anybody to sign it and send it into their local minister. It's an acknowledgement that what was done to us was wrong and in many, many cases illegal.
The sorry's just got to stop and action's got to be taken. It's time for proper redress in a meaningful way.
There's also the question of whether any potential redress scheme should extend beyond mothers to adoptees.
We've been given up. We've been forced away from our families. I still feel in the back of my mind that there's that unwanting. I don't think I'll ever shake that off. I don't think that'll ever go away.